Chapter 16. Musuni non Fidit Antro. Rob slid out of Webb's arms, wiped the grief from his face. Later. I can't do this now. Her heart ached for him. Rob. Later. I'll feel it later. She'd tell us we've got living who need us. Mawazi gently took Webb's hand to scan her wrist. Her heart fluttered at his touch. Your oxygen levels are almost back to normal. He frowned at his scanner. Your breathing, however, is a bit rapid. Not sure what that's about. Your heart rate's also increased. I'm fine, Doc. She pulled her hand free. She had less luck pulling her attention away from the pleasing symmetry of his face, or from his scent. That soothing mix of cedar and apple she picked up even through the medicinal tang. She fought down an urge to play with his hair. Just glad to see you alive. All of you, she added. Her eyes went to his hover chair. Please tell me that's temporary. I can walk with a caudal exoskeleton, said Marwazi. Just don't ask me to dance or play midfielder. All right? Webb centered herself as her hangover melted away. That stuff was magic. Here's what's up. We've got maybe 2 hours before Lurd goes down. I don't know what you've heard, but the Xenos have cut the ship in half. Swank eyed the puddle of molten alien.
Kind of aware, yeah.
They've also been burrowing around the force fields put up to contain them. They can dig through metal. Don't ask me how.
But you found a way to fight them, said Marwazi.
We have. Abelhard? He set down the spray pack. The hail gathered around to examine it. Those look like agrichem canisters, said a red shirt. That's exactly what they are, Webb told her. They melt Xeno like a blowtorch melts candy, and those critters hate it. After I blasted a couple, they stopped coming right at me and they tried ambushing us with bombs. Abelhard smirked. Tried. They're smart. Webb left out how she'd left the warheads out in the open. Command doesn't know how to fight them, and I can't tell them because their bunking comms are still down. Not that they'd answer if I could. Marwazi's expression tightened. The mutiny? There was a firefight. She swallowed to loosen her throat. People died. I don't know much more than that. Other than Blackwell and the Armstrongs are in control of the safe zone. That, and their plans to vent the ship. Mutters from the crew.
Are there lifeboats?
One of them asked. In the officer's lounge, said Webb. Room for 12, maybe 15 if you pack in. But that's tape-shielded. Yeah, so I discovered. She kicked herself again for forgetting. Wound up taking an unscheduled detour through the meat locker. You, a red shirt gaped, escaped the meat locker? I mean, no sense denying it. Yeah, I did. Nobody escapes the meat locker. It was only because I had a queller and my first one of these to stand on. Marwazi raised an eyebrow. Your first one? Yeah. She was getting off topic. It didn't quite work, and I had to leave it in the oubliette, but it made a pretty good steps tool. So here's the plan. How did you get out? Asked another. Look, we really don't have time.
Did you climb up the ejection shaft?
Asked Swank. Well, yeah, said Webb. There were Xenos in the lift shaft, so there was no other way to go.
15 decks.
Swank turned to the other red shirts.
She climbed up 15 decks with no handholds, unarmed.
The red shirts regarded her with awe. Okay, said Webb. Let's get back to evacing.
And then you built another?
Said a red shirt behind her spray pack.
Another weapon?
Yeah, I got the harness for engineering and the canisters from the torpedo bay, so look, we've seriously got maybe an hour. How'd you get there? A red shirt with a bandage over her head pushed her way forward. You're engineering. You didn't have clearance for the torpedo bay? She let out a long sigh. I took Dennis here. Dennis, say hello. Please transport me to the repair bay. I used his permissions. The red shirt turned to her fellows, her face radiant. She killed a cog! Webb raised her hands. No, She killed a fucking cog! A smattering of applause. I just took its head, said Webb. It was in pieces when I got there. How'd you know about the lifeboats? Asked a crewman on crutches. Oh, I couldn't really not tell them. I was in the officer's lounge. That's where the boats were. She could have taken one. His voice cracked. She came back for us. Webb looked to Abelhard. He smiled softly. They seen you, The same qualities that won my heart.
All right. Okay, everyone. I need you to listen. They fell attentively silent. I can fight them. Yes. And I did come back for you. And yes, there are lifeboats in the officer's lounge. So grab what you need. We're evacing. What about the bedridden? Asked Marwazi. The biobeds have their own power, but they won't fit in the escape pod. We're not going to the lounge. Webb was thinking on her feet now. They might expect that. Then where are we bound? The shuttle.
The shuttles are gone,
Said Swank. Not both of them. The one we rode back up from the planet is caught in orbit around the ship, said Webb. It's hollowed out. We had to make some drastic alterations to get people off the surface.
The first time she saved us,
Said Swank.
Thanks again, by the way.
You're welcome. The shuttle's hollowed out, but it's solid. We only have to worry about it buckling if it hits Atmo. There's room for all of us, and the biobeds as well. Marwazi snapped his fingers. And it has a teleporter. Exactly. She gave Marwazi the Armstrong pin, closed his hands over it. I'll send a ping to this once I'm in the shuttle. That'll be your signal to drop your security field so I can keep you out. He nodded, smiled, nodded again. May I have my hand back? Of course. She let go. And what if the Xenos return? She slapped the canisters on the grav jack. I'm leaving these with you. I've got a few shots left in my pack. It's very generous, said Marwazi. But how are we supposed to weaponize these? Come on, Doc, she grinned. You've got the one thing that hurts them and an infirmary full of pissed-off engineers. I'm sure you come up with something. Swank and the other red shirts had already pulled the canisters off the grav jack. That just leaves one issue that I see, said the doctor. How are you going to reach this shuttle? The teleporters are offline. Only one way to get there, said Webb. I'm going to have to spacewalk. Mind if I take the emergency EV suit? Please, don't forget the mag boots. If I did, I'd die. She pried open the EV locker.
You'll have to drift to the shuttle,
Said One Eye.
You'll need a maneuvering pack for that.
My next stop's the cargo bay. They've got them in droves. It would also be where she could depressurize an area of the ship and drift out with the least chance of clipping herself on a bulkhead. Marwazi nodded along as she spoke. Your plan sounds solid. She half smiled. I just hope it works. By the time she'd put on the EV suit, the red shirts had already stripped the power cell to the grav jack to boost their security field.
Hey, Doc, check this out.
Swank held up an electrostatic aerosol sprayer.
We can modify your decon sprayers for agrochems. They won't hold much, but we got a bunch of them. And if the chems are as potent as we saw, these should hold them back. With your permission.
You'll have blanket permission to use what you need, said Marwazi.
Thanks.
Swank turned to Webb.
Could I take that torch off you?
One sec. Avert your eyes, folks. Webb shielded her eyes with the goggles and cut Dennis's spine out of the spray pack frame. Abelhard set a meaty hand on Marwazi's shoulder.
Physician, I would beg a favor of you.
Marwazi looked up, alarmed. Yes?
Be good to her.
There was a bittersweet look in his eyes.
It was my dream, I suppose. But for a moment, a long, wonderful moment that I shall forever cherish, I forgot we were not at the same station.
Marwazi nodded slowly. I don't understand. Abelhard flicked his eyes her way.
I see how she looks at you.
Marwazi looked to Webb, his brow wrinkled. Then something clicked. His eyes went wide. Webb flushed. Okay! She shoved the torch and welding goggles towards Swank. Abelhard, let's go. She pulled the spray pack back on, relishing how her lungs didn't complain or seize up. She cast a final glance at the doctor, who was regarding her thoughtfully. Good luck, everyone! Good luck, Webb, said the doctor, his voice composed of warmth and honey. Thank you. She pulled on the EV helmet to hide her smile. Haroon. The trek to the cargo bay was oddly quiet. There were sparks here and there, flickering textures as walls morphed into masonry and back. Strange what one could get used to. Webb's sensory input was limited in the EV suit, but she could still hear a distinct lack of chittering. Maybe they decided she wasn't important enough to attack. Or maybe they decided it wasn't worth ambushing her again. The spray pack certainly felt lighter without Dennis's head weighing it down. Nice of Abelhard to carry it. It's not much further, she told him. He nodded noncommittally. You're quieter than usual. He smiled, tightly, his chin to his chest.
How long have you been in love with the doctor? Her face burned.
I'm not.
My dear lady, that sad smile again. If there's one thing I know, it's how a lover behaves in the presence of their beloved.
This is hardly the time to discuss this.
That's not a denial. She flushed again.
Doesn't matter. He's not interested in me.
Ah, a wounded sigh. So it is true. You've changed, dear Mary.
I have. I'm sorry I'm not the Mary you remember. She was a good woman.
She took his hand, the hand of an arcade sprite. Somehow it didn't feel ridiculous.
I never meant to lead you on or give you a false impression.
His expression hardened. Would he storm away? Did his program include the possibility of leaving her? Pixels and light he may have been, but she'd gotten used to him, had come to rely on him. Strange indeed what one could get used to. His face softened. You have nothing to apologize for, my love. He caught himself. My lady. We cannot choose whom we love, only whose love to accept, or whom we deem worthy of it. That actually stung. Stupid program had a way of getting under her skin. Or maybe her oxygen levels were still low. They reached the door to the cargo bay without further incident or conversation. Its door stood intact. No holes had been hacked through its walls. Seemed promising.
Dennis, open the cargo bay door. Independence, open the door to the cargo bay.
It whisked open. Webb sucked in a breath and put her hand to her faceplate. Abelhard actually crossed himself. The bay looked like a bombed refugee camp. Bodies and parts of bodies lay scattered like crudely reaped wheat. The partitions between the bays were up, linking them into an open space hundreds of meters long. Pits and burrows pockmarked the floor where the Xenos had tunneled up.
Oh, God.
The unassigned. The quadless crew waiting for an open berth. She felt sick. But that had been the point of stashing them here, hadn't it? To keep them out of sight, out of mind. Anyone who'd been upgraded from the pool of expendable crew didn't want any reminders about how expendable they were. Numb, bile burning the back of her throat, Webb picked her way through the carnage. Her helmet kept out the smell, but it magnified the thundering of her heart. She wished she had Frankie's calm, even for a moment. Focus, Frankie would have told her. No thinking. Just stay on task. With the partitions raised, Webb would need to open all 6 bay doors at once to avoid getting slammed by whirling debris, which would space the remains of all the poor unassigned. Can't be helped, Frankie would have said. Put it out of mind. Focus on what you can affect. The burrows were arranged in clusters in the floor, all where the deck plating was thinnest. She hugged the back wall of the bay so she could keep them in view. Equipment and control consoles lay smashed and scattered throughout the cargo bays. She fought down a surge of panic. If she couldn't get the bay doors open... The master control console lay in the main bay just a bit over, behind a giant hedge. She had to remind herself there was no hedge, just the arcade being stupid. She tightened her grip on the spray wand. Abelhard, keep an eye out for wolves. She touched the hedge. It flickered and vanished, revealing a mass of unassigned huddled within a force field pin. They gaped at her. A few dozen of them, red shirts all, hunkered down within a shimmering force field box around the main control console. From the other side of the pen rose a knot of Xenos. Wolves, warned Abelhard. They leapt for her. Webb fired, blasting the closest to sputtering pieces. The others squealed and fled towards the nearest pit. Webb adjusted the spray nozzle for distance and fired, knifing them in half before they reached the burrow. Have at thee! Abelhard's sword clanged on a carapace, swatting a Xeno she hadn't seen out of the air. He seized the Xeno in a bear hug. Webb waved the wand like a fire hose, bathing Abelhard. The Xeno melted, shrieking in his arms. Barely seconds had passed. Webb wiped the chems off her faceplate, her heart beating like a rabbit's. The red shirts in the pen were staring in slack-jawed shock.
You killed them,
said one, her face streaked with blood and grease.
Yeah.
A cascade of thoughts raced through her mind. They must have created the force field pen to protect themselves. No, not force fields. Their spectrum was wrong.
Are those tractor beams?
The one who'd spoken nodded.
We fed them through the emitters here. They were destroying the consoles.
Ingenious. Does it go through the floor? She nodded rapidly. Good thinking. She hadn't counted on the unassigned or their inventive defense, but now she couldn't depressurize the bay without sucking them out into space. Webb did some quick mental math. There wouldn't be room for the unassigned and the folks in the infirmary in the shuttle, not with the biobeds. The remaining unassigned didn't appear to be injured, which was its own miracle all on its own. Okay, Webb turned to the red shirt who's spoken. What's your name?
Sedlak.
Sedlak. Hi, I'm Webb. It's not safe for...
The crew advocate?
Yeah. Hi. Now...
And who?
She glanced up at Abelhard. He's a figment of our imagination. She adjusted her spray wand back to wide dispersal. Where are the nav packs? Sedlak pointed to a rack of them. The nav packs were intact. Webb sighed with relief. I have to go. Just stay safe.
Is anyone coming for us?
Webb felt helpless. She couldn't just leave them. The solution hit her. Engineering.
What?
You need to get to engineering. Blackwell will be sending a team there. Sedlak brightened.
They'll protect us?
Actually, you'll have to protect them. You'll all teep out when their work is done. That's the only way you get out before he vents the ship. The unassigned looked lost and frightened. Webb chanced to look towards the adjacent agricultural bay, where she spotted a few agrochem canisters stacked next to a rack of agropods. Okay, look at this. She turned so they could see her spray pack. See the pack? The housing and tanks? It's just an extinguisher rig with agrochem canisters and a fabbed connector.
If we drop the beams, they'll slaughter us,
said Sedlak. Webb brushed the edge of the force field pen. It threw her hand back like a gale-forced wind. The cage is smart. Really smart. I never would have thought of this.
We can't leave it.
No, but you can move it. Reroute the tractor emitter controls to a pad. You've got one, yeah?
We do.
Good. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to walk your cage, plane by plane, over to where you need to go. Or grab what you need with another beam and tractor it over. The penned-in red shirts perked up. It's not an exact fit, Webb told them. You'll have to fab a connector. The cargo teleporter should work, to get the canisters to work with the spray wand. But it's not hard. All the tools you need are in the mechanical bay. Please transport me to the repair bay. Shut up, Dennis. Just keep that pen over you and turtle your way where you need to go. Can you do that? Sedlak's face hardened.
Absolutely.
Damn right, Webb flashed a toothy grin. You guys ready to start playing offense? Resolute nods. Frankie was alone in the brig. They hadn't even left a guard. Not that they had much reason to. She hadn't exactly put up a fight, which hadn't prevented them from leaving her face covered in bruises. She tried ignoring the pain, but that sent her thoughts towards the darker reasons she might have been left alone. Were they off executing more red shirts? Every pop and strain made her wonder if she was hearing rifle discharges or just the intermittent sounds of the ship. They might still need her for something, to run the teleporter maybe, or for a court-martial, someone to point a finger at when the dust had settled and the rescue ships arrived. She tried to put it out of her mind, tried not to think of Chelsea and the other soldiers trapped on the far side of the blast door, of the screams and rips and thuds that came echoing through. She tried not to think of Webb, lost and alone, alive, she hoped, somewhere down in the ship's infested guts. Frankie pulled her legs beneath her on the grated floor of her cell, let her focus fall to her breathing, one of the few things she could control. Retreat into the self, ignore the chattering of monkey mind, which, to be fair, was chattering with more than its usual anxiety. Random thoughts could not be avoided. Try not to think of a pink elephant, her Zen teacher had told her, before whacking her with his ever-present stick to snap her back to the present. Avoiding thoughts wasn't the point. Letting them pass was, watching as they drifted by on the currents of the mind. The key, which had taken her far too many whaps with a stick to realize, was staying on the riverbank the thoughts drifted by, not getting drawn into the current. Breathe in, breathe out. Her thoughts passed by, random, chaotic but separate. A separation of thought from thinker, of mind from moment. She settled into the calm, into the fathomless deep. Her eyes felt both heavy and active, and she could hear her blood pumping in her temples. Time fell away, and she was burning, screaming as the death cloud pitted. Her beautiful limbs and her body's gases vaporized within her. A burning star streaking through the heavens, bursting into a blossom of choking death. The image relayed through 1,000 resonance chambers and carrying the cumulative panic of every drone who'd passed it along, warning every hive and sect. Fleeing now, screaming, following the Elder's mind map in a mad dash to the burrows as clumps of alien plants burst from the burning surface until the ground gave way and she was falling onto the grated floor of her cell. With gasping hacks, Frankie stared at the soft, brown limbs she took a moment to realize were hers. It was like waking from a nightmare, but one that left a lingering pain in her head, a migraine throbbing at the base of her skull.
"Let me out!"
She scrambled up, pounded on the force field of her cell, despite the burns it left on her hands, despite there being no guard to hear.
"Let me out! I know why they hate us!"